So what happens with default purposes is we apply what's good, what's acceptable, what's successful onto people. And that's default purpose, where authentic purpose is your genuine reason for existence, your genuine usefulness that makes a difference in society or the world around you.
Welcome to Classroom 5.0, a podcast that uncovers industry insights, cutting-edge research, and practical evidence-based strategies that help us all to imagine and design learning environments and pathways for this ever-evolving world, so that together we can best support the next gen to uncover and deliver their unique potential. This episode has been recorded from our hometown of Port Macquarie, which we're grateful to share and enjoy alongside the traditional owners of Beer Pie Country, whose ongoing cultures and connections to lands and waters we celebrate, and whose elders, past, present, and emerging, we pay our respect to. My name is Marianne Power, the co-founder of the Posify Group and your host for today's episode, which I am so excited to be bringing you because today we're interviewing Zach Mercurio, whose work and research on purpose has personally and professionally inspired me for many years now. Zach is driven by the belief that everyone is built for purpose, desires meaningfulness, and deserves dignity at work, school, and in life. And that's a purpose that we can connect with. He's an accomplished author, keynote speaker, consultant, and award-winning researcher specializing in purposeful leadership, meaningful work, mattering, and positive organizational development. Zach earned his PhD in organizational learning, performance, and change from Colorado State University, where he serves as an Honorary Fellow in the Department of Psychology's Center for Meaning and Purpose, and as an instructor in organizational behavior and development. His research on meaningful work has been awarded by the Association for Talent Development, the Academy of Management, and the Academy of Human Resource Development. Zach helps forge purposeful leaders, and he has worked with over 100 global companies, countless schools, universities, and not-for-profits, and he's written one of my all-time favorite books, The Invisible Leader: Transform Your Life, Work, and Organization with the Power of Authentic Purpose, to provide individuals and organizations with the tools they need to activate purpose and create cultures where everyone matters. And Zach, I am such a fan of this book. I can't wait to dive into it. We're going to do that and all more. But I have to ask, I've noticed, of course, you're living in Fort Collins, Colorado at the moment with your beautiful young family and a dog that you describe affectionately as being quite quirky. As a dog lover myself, what is going on with this dog of yours?
I don't know what's going on. You need to help figure this out. One of the things that's interesting about me is I've never had a dog that could fetch, no matter how hard I try. So she can't fetch either. I adopt dogs. That's something that we do. And she can't fetch. She barks at people randomly that she knows really well, I think just for fun. She doesn't like the heat, but she doesn't like it to be too cold. So either way, she'll complain and protest going outside. And just recently we were out on a walk and it was very hot because it's summer here. And she just laid down and wouldn't move.
Okay.
And she's in great shape. So
and what kind of dog is she?
I don't know. Everything.
It sounds like a very quirky
mix. So she's very quirky, very difficult to figure out, but she's super sweet. And my kids love her. And she loves them.
She sounds like a beautiful family pet who's keeping you all on your toes, quite frankly.
Yeah, and you said something that's I think we're going to get into, but uniqueness, unique potential. She personifies or dogifies uniqueness. So.
Well, I really want to jump into that because that is something that we are so passionate about here at Posify, is uncovering unique potential. So maybe we'll have to come over and meet your puppy dog one day. But before we do, let's pop some context in for our listeners who some of will be new. We talk a lot about purpose here at Posify, and we are always inspired by the emerging research and particularly your conversations around how purpose relates to organization and education and leadership in particular. But you make a really important distinction, I think, in your definition of authentic purpose. And I'm wondering if you could describe for us what that definition is and why you think that distinction is important from, say, perhaps the pop culture reference to purpose that we all hear.
Purpose is the reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. Now, it's something's use or usefulness. And there's a danger And that danger is that you could have a default purpose. Society or someone else could say, you are this, so you must be this. Hey, my kid, my 3-year-old had a STEM day at daycare, right?
Wow.
So STEM, science, technology,
Yes,
engineering,
in
mathematics.
daycare. I love that.
Daycare, right? It's great, but also we're all of a sudden tracking him into careers. He didn't have a watercolor painting day.
True.
He didn't have a bus driver day, right? He didn't have a plumber day. He had a STEM day. And so what happens with default purposes is we apply what's good, what's acceptable, what's successful onto people. And that's default purpose, where authentic purpose is your genuine reason for existence, your genuine usefulness that makes a difference in society or the world around you. So a lot of this comes from sociologist Corey Key's work. He describes 4 types of purpose. Not all purpose is created equal. You can have an aimless purpose, doesn't have direction, doesn't have a clear goal associated with it, and it's useless. So aimless but useless. It's like, I want to make a lot of money, or I just want to have a job that pays a lot, right? That's an aimless and useless purpose. You can also have an aimful, a directed purpose, which has a very key indicator for success. You can measure it, but it's not useful to society. I want to make as much money as I can by age 35, right? That's a purpose that has direction, but it's not useful. You can also have a purpose that is very useful, but is directionless. There's no specifics around. It's like the people who say, I want to help people, but they don't know who, when, where, or how they're going to help them. Authentic purpose is a purpose that's directed and useful to others. And it's yours. You have unique gifts that match up to unique human needs, and that's your fingerprint. That's your purpose.
I love those 2 things together. So unique gifts that match up to unique needs, and that's your purpose.
Yes, and here's the really great, amazing thing. You already have it right now. So you have strengths. Mm-hmm. You impact other people. Mm-hmm. By default, you have purpose.
I'm going to do this to you a lot. I know we had a script, but I'm going to go off script for a minute here because we speak to a lot of people who are like, but I don't know what that is. So if we've got a listener right now who's listening to this and they can accept that, yes, they have the unique skills, and there's a little bit of doubt of, but what impact am I actually having? Because you talk a lot in your book, and I'm kind of going to cheat here. You talk a lot in your book about measuring the daily impact. Can you share that a little bit with us now?
Yeah. So big distinction is between finding a purpose and being purposeful.
Okay.
Purpose is not something out there that's waiting to be found. It's right where you are, waiting to be acknowledged, right? So if purpose is our contribution, then being purposeful is contribution-centered thinking, being and doing. Now, if someone's struggling, right, to understand what my strengths are, what impact I have is, that's very common. We get a lot of purpose anxiety. What's your purpose? Elicits anxiety, right? And that's because we think about it as some one singular thing you'll go find in some blog article or book.
Yes.
But here's the thing. So think about the next person you're going to talk to today and ask yourself, how can I use my strengths to positively impact that person? That is being on purpose. So another thing you might do is over the next 7 days, keep 3 lists at the end of each day. Write down 3 things. 1, what did I love doing today? And write down everything. 2, what was I good at today? And 3, what bothered me about the world today? Or how did I contribute to others today? You can pick either one of those. At the end, don't judge yourself. At the end of 7 days, you're going to have 21 lists. I challenge you to come back to me and come back to us and tell me if you find themes. You're going to find themes. Now, when we talk about strengths, where what you love to do, your passion, your energy, touches what you're good at, that's where we get a psychological strength.
Yes.
And where your strength can make an impact, that's where we start forming purpose. So that's a really cool exercise. I call it a purpose journaling exercise. It's incredibly powerful.
I love that. And we break that down with our kids by asking them to look at what irks and excites them over the same amount of period.
I love that.
So maybe we've got a little bit of an intersection there for kids and for adults. Oh, you've described that so beautifully. And I've bookmarked something that you said, because my instant reaction when you said STEM was at daycare was, wow, fantastic. And actually, it was a really nice reflection moment for me to realize, maybe fantastic if we as educators are keeping that informed in our back mind, but what else is informing our education of children, and what labels are we putting onto them? So I'm going to borrow that one for my own learning. Thank you, Zach.
Of course.
So I wonder if we move on now to the next question. What are the challenges that our parents, which we've kind of touched on already, haven't we, is the idea that they struggle with conversations with their young people about purpose, and more specifically about what they want to do in life after school. And so at Posify, we've been playing around with this exact idea, is how can we map our skills, our strengths, our values, our interests, and our purpose to flip that question on its head and to ask instead, well, what is it that you stand for, and what impact do you want to create in the world? And we're doing that because we recognize the enormous benefit that purpose has in helping people to transfer skills. But I'm wondering, Zach, given your groundedness in research, what does the current research say about this approach to what we've traditionally called career development? And what role do you see purpose playing in bridging the gap between, say, education and industry as we move forward in this next new evolving world for our young people?
I'll actually start in the field of architecture, if I may. So,
yeah, please.
A standard formula for determining good architecture that's been widely applied is that form should follow function. And when you think about that, right, it's the form of something, the shape of something should follow what it's being used for. Now, let's think about how we develop humans.
Yes.
We develop them typically by having them form their lives, their career plans, their academic programs, what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, the 10-step plans, the 20-year plans, all of that, the retirement plans, without helping them understand their function. And it always leaves a mess. Anytime you try to form something without understanding its function first, what usefulness someone has, it leaves a mess. And I have seen that in my work in higher education, because I worked for 8 years in higher education doing some career coaching and academic advising work, and taking the time to uncover people's function, where their unique strengths make a difference, is absolutely essential. And it's a basic design principle. But I think we've been doing it backwards, for a long time, which is why I'm glad of the work that you're doing. But then there's a couple of key research findings that indicate that when we do design people's lives backwards, form before function,
reverse engineer, if you like.
Yeah, it can leave a bit of a mess. So there was an interesting study done of first-year students in college by this psychologist named Jennifer Crocker, and she wanted to know what would happen for people who set achievement-oriented goals, and what would happen for people who set contribution-oriented goals. And she followed them over a set period of time. Achievement-oriented goals is like, I want to get this job so that I can make a lot of money. I want to get this starting salary. I want to join this club so I can make my resume look better. Self-image goals is what she calls it. Goals to help advance the self. Contribution goals are goals to help advance someone else's life or solve meaningful problems. And what she found was that the people who set more self-image goals, the students, significantly experience more anxiety, depression, stress than those who set more contribution goals. Now, why is this, right? It's because slowly over time, these people in the group that set more self-image goals started hinging their identity on either achieving something or not achieving something. And then what? Sense of self came and went, versus when you think about how am I going to contribute, it's much more transcendent to different situations. It's the difference between asking, what do you want to do with your life? And what should your life do for others?
Oh, I like that reframe.
Right? Because when you ask, what do you want to do with your life? You're going to get a linear plan. And as you specialize, your opportunities actually narrow to what you can do. But when you lose the ability, which you will as you age at some point, to do what you do, your skills, you're left with then what? What am I going to, who am I now? Your identity goes too. When you ask, how can I contribute? You can use your strength in a variety of situations to solve a variety of problems. And it actually widens our attention, widens our perspective, widens our opportunities versus narrows them.
And it also reminds me a little bit of the research around extrinsic and intrinsic motivators as well, in terms of drive and having that contribution as being that driving force. It kind of makes sense. And it's fantastic to hear this research that backs it up, that an intrinsic motivating drive that you can transfer across. It doesn't really matter what the job is. If you're bringing yourself to it, then that's the thing that's going to keep you loving learning.
Yeah. And so let's if we can, I want to close that loop between achievement and contribution though, because it's not a linear path either. It's not either achievement or contribution. It's contribution it's achievement because of contribution.
Can you speak more about that to some of the cynics who might be thinking, come on, like this is a little bit, I'm going to get to this later, but fluffy, this purpose thing.
Yeah. I mean, my kindergartner's learning right now that you can't have a result, an effect without a cause. So it's silly. It seems silly, right? In that language to think, let me pursue my achievements to get an achievement. Let me pursue the effect to get an effect. A company saying, let me try to pursue profit to get profit. Purposeful people obsessively pursue their cause, their contribution, and they trust that the effects will follow. But we get scared and we try to secure security. And so we try to hold on to what we can control, which is all the numbers and the goal and the plan. But when in reality, it's the value that we add that results in most results and achievements that we see on the other side. So it's a loop. And the achievement piece, like for example, one more study is by psychologist David Yeager and some of his colleagues who was studying at-risk youth in a high school and studying math scores. And he deployed a simple exercise where he had students reflect on what is the bigger purpose, how will learning math help you improve the world in the future? And then he had them read an anecdote from a graduate who talked about how they've improved the world because of high school. And the group that had that transcendent motive beyond self, even doing rote routine math classes, after controlling for numerous other variables, had a 0.3 increase in overall GPA, which is huge for high school students. So when we don't feel like what we're doing matters or that we matter, it's very easy for nothing to matter. And so that's where I think purpose has to come first.
I hope everybody got that and sends it across every single Twitter platform, Instagram platform, shares it out loud, because that is just beautifully summed. Yes. And, it brings me right into a segue for our next population of people that we are so passionate about serving. And it's our twice exceptional students. So these are the kids that have a profile that is both of giftedness. So they demonstrate giftedness, and they also have some neurodivergence. So whether that be ADHD or autism, Asperger's, as it used to be called as well, or a specific learning disorder. And one of the unique challenges this particular group of students faces is that they are acutely aware of their weaknesses and how they show up in the world. And they tend to get referred to as quirky. And so what they develop are some coping mechanisms around hiding aspects of themselves that they perceive aren't able to be shared for achievement's sake. And so off the back of what we've just been talking about, basing ourselves in contribution, I also loved, before I get to that, I mentioned on your Instagram that I've been unashamedly stalking because it's fantastic and everybody needs to follow you at Zach Mercurio. But you wrote something that really resonated for me, and particularly in serving this group, about grit. And you wrote that grit is found in the footprint of each step forward. So given we've both established our shared love of uncovering unique potential, I'm wondering, how do you think that we can redesign our learning and teaching methods and experiences in the future to help our young people, and particularly this group, identify their own measures of success, so their unique metrics, so that they can honor their next best step forward and, as you said, adopt and exemplify great grit?
Wow. There was a lot
It's
there.
kind of two parts to that question, isn't it?
There was a lot there. Yeah. I want to go back to the former with talking about, you talked about these unique gifts that were being
Yes.
hidden because of societal stigma and treatment on being different. And this is where creating moments of mattering as a skill must be essential in any curriculum that develops any human being. And mattering is the feeling that we are valued by the people around us, by our schools, by our communities, by our families, and that we add value. It's knowing how our uniqueness makes a difference. Now, what's powerful about mattering as a concept is psychologically, it's one of the only concepts that's largely dependent on others to create for us. We can believe that we matter, but without the evidence of our mattering, which comes from others, it's very hard to maintain the experience of mattering. And so when I think about the second part of your questions, what can we do to help people realize their unique potential? Well, first, I think, we need to notice people better. We need to, there was a study done recently of over 66,000 students from 6th grade through 12th grade. And they were asked, how many of you all think that your teacher would notice if you were absent? And over half of the sample indicated that they didn't think their teacher would notice if they were absent.
Wow, that breaks my heart. Wow.
So mattering may seem like common sense. It is not common practice.
Yeah.
And the practice of noticing someone, noticing their uniqueness, noticing how they navigated a problem in a classroom, in a group discussion, being able to name the uniqueness.
Absolutely. I'm wondering how many educators out there might be justifiably thinking, I've got a lot on my timetable. I've got a lot in a classroom. I've got in Australia up to 32 kids and I'm noticing every one of them, but it's that difference. It's going into action, isn't it? And naming what you're noticing and validating what you're seeing and speaking to those strengths.
When I was graduating, when I was in high school for me, secondary, I was going to go into the military because, I just didn't know what to do. I knew I wanted to go to college, but I just didn't feel like I fit anywhere. And I had a journalism teacher that every day brought in a different pamphlet because she thought I was a good writer and brought in a pamphlet of schools with good journalism programs and told me every day, I think that you could be a good writer. Wow. And she had over 100 students and she thought about me. Outside, she noticed that I was struggling making this decision. She thought about me and took an action to show me.
Yes.
That's what noticing is. The second part of that is affirming, right? So we have to be able to name people's unique strengths and show students how their unique strengths make a difference. Because you have these unique strengths, this is what this class is able to do as a whole.
Yeah.
And when we can do that, it's incredibly powerful. And the last one is that human beings need to feel needed. So, I'll lay an illustration out psychologically. Imagine, so you want your students to engage in class, but if they don't feel needed, if they don't feel like they are integral, indispensable to the whole, it's very hard to engage. So imagine I invited you to a dinner party on Friday night, but I said, hey, come to this dinner party. And you were like, yeah, I'll come. But you didn't really write a commitment. And on Friday morning, you get up and you're like, I'd rather not go. How easy is it for you to just get out of it? Say, I'm just not going to go. But if I said, hey, Marianne, I need you to come because I need you to bring the dessert.
Ooh, that's going to be tricky. Leave the ice cream at the front door and bolt.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
When people feel like they're needed in a space, that's what has to precede engagement and precedes learning. And that's why noticed, affirmed, and needed, building communities that create mattering, I think is the essential both curricular and co-curricular element that needs to be embedded into education from here on out.
And as I'm hearing you speak, I'm joining some dots and I want to check in with you if they make sense. And I'm capturing what you're saying is that if we can create mattering through a lens of purpose and explaining, identifying, validating, and reflecting back what your unique contribution is by mapping and speaking to your skills, your strengths, your values, and how they come together for a purpose, then we increase belonging. And by increasing belonging, We therefore increase a student's desire to overcome obstacles potentially that are in their way for the common good so that they can apply that sense of grit that we really want them to apply when they're faced with those challenges around weaknesses. But I might have joined some dots that aren't quite right there. So feel free to check it out.
Well, in Angela Duckworth's book called Grit, in her studies, she finds that having purpose is one of the key predictors of high grit scores. Pleasure being so having purpose and knowing who needs you is critical. It's like resilience is also found when we can ask, how am I going to get through this? But it's even more powerful. We're more resilient when we can answer the question, who needs me to get through this? Who relies on me? And that's how mattering plays in, and a connection to usefulness, and a connection to others rely on me. Others need my strengths. Others need me to come to class today. I'm needed here. Gordon Flett in his volume on the psychology of mattering cites a study of students who are in a state of potentially self-harming. And he looks at their journal entries. The two most common, almost verbatim journal entries are, no one cares about me and no one would miss me if I was gone. That's a mattering problem. That's not an individual's problem. That's an ecology problem. That's an environment problem. So again, it correlates to resilience, because if we don't feel like we matter, it's easy for nothing to matter. To survive, we have to have a will to survive. As Viktor Frankl says, that will is our meaning. That will is our contribution. That will is fulfilling the irreplaceable contribution that all of us make, but we have to believe it first.
Oh, you are singing every song I have sung to myself previously to join the dots between, my expertise in clinical psychology, but then my passion and obsession for helping people live a meaningful life, because it's the intersection between positive psychology and clinical psychology. We see it both. It supports languishing to bring up to functioning, and it moves us from functioning to optimal flourishing. So thank you for articulating that far better than I think I ever could.
No, you did it. You planted the seed. I've really never linked, when you link resilience to purpose to mattering, it's powerful. And all of these things are different. And I think it's really important to understand these differences that we're talking about, because mattering is something that each of us can be responsible for each other. And that's its power as a construct. Like self-efficacy, self-worth, all of those things are outcome variables, but like those are things that result from certain things. But you and I are directly responsible for each other's feelings of mattering.
That is so true. And that's an impact within itself. Oh my goodness, Zach, I could talk to you for days. And I have to say, I feel like I have your little voice in my ear, or your big voice in my little ear, every time I read your book. And I have highlighted it, and I have dog-eared so many pages, and each time I read it, I find something new. But there is one thing that I come back to each and every time, and I'm going to read it out loud for our listeners here, because it reminds me of the next step I need to take. So you write, some readers might see the whole idea of purpose as fluffy, as one CEO told me. And my answer to that take, one I have tried very hard to address here, is that purpose is only fluffy when we don't strategize around it and actively pursue it. So, and I'm going to put a link to the show notes, don't worry, of both your book and all of these wonderful papers you're citing and research, everything, because there's so much juice in there. But that's one of the gold nuggets that I really hold on to, is we need to strategize around it and actively pursue it. And so given that it sounds like we can agree on the importance of fostering purpose and mattering and belonging amongst our young people, untapping their unique potential, I wonder, how do you imagine as parents, educators, and industry leaders that we could intentionally strategize and actively pursue the design of our future learning and environments and spaces in a way that it gives opportunity to not only to uncover this purpose development in our young people, but help them to apply it themselves?
We have to start with ourselves. I share this story often because 2 years ago, I used to get up and look at my phone and say, what do I have to do today? And I realized that's a bad question, right? We have this internal dialogue that tends to be results obsessed. What do I have to do today? And I realized when I read a study on gratitude journaling, I was like, let me apply that to purpose. I should be asking myself, not what am I going to do today, but how is what I'm going to do today going to impact other people? And the questions we ask ourselves, the questions we ask each other determine the answers that we get, the quality of the answers that we get. So one place to start is with individuals. If you want your students or kids to be purposeful, are you being purposeful? Just like we're wired for language, if we're not around people who speak, we'll never learn to speak. Just like we're wired to search for purpose, if we're not around purposeful people, it's very difficult to discover purpose.
Yes.
And so I think that role in an environment is really critical. So one of the, I think, number one things that everybody can do is start asking people better questions. Instead of asking your kid, right? Hey, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want your life to do for others? Instead of asking,
I love that reframe. I'm going to pinch that one.
I know. Yeah. Or instead of saying like, what is your ideal job? What kind of job do you want? Saying, what kinds of problems do you want to solve with your strengths? What kind of problems do you think your strengths can solve? Instead of being like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Oh gosh, please, let's stop asking that question. Say, if I could ban one question, it would be, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because basically what you're saying is, you're not quite good enough yet. Just wait 5 years from now. You actually create anti-mattering by asking that question. But anyway, so instead of how can I, where do you see yourself in 5 years? You can say, what kind of impact do you want to have made 5 years from now? Instead of, what did you do at school today? Who did you help today? And who helped you today? What you talk about becomes what you think about becomes your reality. And that's how you start creating better environments.
Yeah. Gosh, those questions are fantastic. And I'm really glad you clarified what you meant by where do you see yourself in 5 years' time, because I automatically went to the irony that who would have thought we would be here 5 years ago?
Oh, true. Right. I know. Right. It requires you to be a mystic.
Absolutely. And we know that the future world is just changing so rapidly. Some of the jobs that our kids are going to move into haven't even been designed yet. In fact, our kids are in a unique position that they can design those jobs themselves. But I really like that point in what's the impact you want to create it, because that doesn't have to change. Just because all of the ways that you could do it might, doesn't mean that the purpose changes. And so for me, that evoked a sense of, well, if that's where I'm going to, and that's the contribution I want to make, then what's the next best step I can make today with that end in mind? So I hope everybody's taken notes, because I certainly have. They are beautiful questions. Thank you so much, Zach.
Of course.
My goodness. Is there anything, because we have covered a lot of ground, that I haven't given you the opportunity that you would love to speak to around purpose, around the future of learning, around the future of work, around where we're at as a society and how all this matters?
Wow, that's another big question. I want to acknowledge the fact that, especially for parents and in some instances, teachers and educators, I think where this goes wrong is in part because of a very good natural desire. We want the people that we teach, we want our kids to be secure. We want security for people, right? And we want them to have a secure future. What we miss is that we think security is having enough money, having everything all lined up. And we can use our care for people to try to make sure they're secure. And so I just want to point that out, that's a very real drive that we have as human beings, is security. Yeah. So I think it's important to redefine security. The ultimate security for your kid or for anybody in your classroom is a sense of self-worth. That will transcend job, that will transcend career, that will transcend it all. That's the ultimate security, is a sense that I matter. Everything else is a way to deliver that person's significance and mattering to the world. So I just want to point that out. And I would say that right now, judging by some of the research that we've seen on mattering and just things like that, study on the students of who would notice if they were absent.
Yeah.
And as we come out of this pandemic and in a place of heightened job and health insecurity, people who are unemployed, who are susceptible to worthlessness, uselessness, coming back to work, essential workers trying to figure out, do I feel essential? Social injustice rising. I mean, I think we're at a quintessential point where we're going to see a meaning deficit that must be filled by people who create mattering for other people.
Absolutely.
And I think that we're at the point where that's going to be the critical skill of educators, leaders, for the next couple decades, if not next generation, is, do we create environments where every human being feels noticed, affirmed, and needed?
I agree. I could not agree more. I think that's going to be the secret sauce for us all moving forward. Yeah. And I also want to applaud you. Thank you for accepting my rather neurodiverse brain itself and its shiny light syndrome, and taking what was a huge question and bringing it down into a really specific point, that the key to our success really is what I heard: moving forward as a human race to look after each other, to hold each other, and to provide a sense of psychological safety so we can continue to flourish and thrive is noticing each other and reflecting back why we matter, and taking that responsibility within ourselves to ask that question of ourselves and take action. I think that's beautiful.
I can't remember her name, and I need to remember it, and I'll send it to you. But there's an American poet who said, we need to become interested in each other again.
Yes. Modeling. That's the other thing I heard you say before. It's without that modeling piece, that's how our children learn. And if we can get that back, or infuse it more to the point, I don't think you can ever do enough of modeling.
Right.
Well, on that point, Zach, I hope I've modeled to you the opportunity to think big with lots of different ways of thinking, because we're going to play a game.
A couple other podcasts.
We do too.
You just brought up psychological safety. I'm not even going to launch into that.
Do you know what? You could, because I saw that you did on Instagram the other day, and I nearly brought that in, and I thought, that could be my little carrot dangling for Zach for another one, because we would love to have you join us again.
Yeah, it's hard to feel like you matter when you're in a state of emotional or physical fear.
Yeah.
Those two things tend to be incompatible. But anyway, we'll get into that.
Oh, do you know what? No, we got into that. So let's go there, because
okay.
I just think in terms of designing things forward, and we're going to come to this, I think, in example with our last exciting activity, but in terms of designing our learning spaces forward, because we know about psychological safety in the workplace, many people are familiar about that, but how does this then apply as educators, as industry leaders, as parents for the next generation? Why is psychological safety so important?
It's important because the most destructive force in society is learned helplessness.
Yes.
When an individual thinks their voice is pointless, when they think that their ideas are pointless, their art is pointless, when they believe that their lives are pointless because they've been shut down or silenced by somebody. And learned helplessness is a result of fear of speaking up, of being known, of being seen. It's a fear. It results in blame. It results in shame, and which are very destructive to learning, development, and innovation. And so creating an environment where people can feel free to experiment, to make mistakes, to give their ideas without fear of being shut down or retaliation. Gosh, I mean, I think that's what we're going to need: as many voices, as many neurodivergencies as possible to move forward. And I think leaders that liberate those voices and who give space for people to freely share their voice and be part of solutions, that's going to be necessary for thriving.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let's demonstrate this in real life then, because one of the things that we love to do is draw on design thinking. And one of the great things about design thinking is that it promotes this mindset of throwing big ideas out there, flaring out, as we call. So no idea is a bad idea, for the purpose of gathering themes. And then once you gather your themes, you can bring them in, and then we can start to use our detailing and our focusing skills. But let's practice flaring out, Zach, and see how you go. And I want to preface this.
Okay.
The psychological piece is the reminder that there is no idea is a bad idea. And if you feel uncomfortable, that's okay. We will pass and we'll move on to the next one. But this is a creative activation exercise that we love to do. I'm going to ask you to put your imagination hat on right now as we speak and jump into the future and around the idea of purpose. And we're not relating to people here. Actually, I might. We'll see where we go because I'm also going to be playing. We're going to talk about what's in a traditional classroom environment today or learning space and what might its renewed purpose be. Let's go 50 years from now. Are you ready? So kind of like a word association task. I'm going to say one word. What's the first thing that comes to mind for you when you propel that purpose 50 years from now? Does that make sense? Let's give it a go. And if it doesn't, we can correct as we go. You got questions?
Can I clarify one thing?
Yes,
What do
please.
you mean by what will its purpose be?
Okay, so let me give you an example.
Be, in 2071?
Good point. Let's stretch this a little bit further based on what we've learned in today's podcast. So we could do that. What's its purpose? So for a pencil today, its purpose, we could say, is to write on a notepad. Or today, we could say a pencil's purpose is to communicate huge ideas to the rest of the world in a written form, which would be more in line with your purpose.
Got it. Yep. So I'm thinking of that
in 50 years' time.
Beautiful. Okay.
Big. Fun. Are you ready? I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm ready. No, I'm not.
I'm really ready to stretch this.
I'm not ready.
Okay.
But I'm going to do it anyway.
Nice. For what reason? What's your contribution here?
Because this is a stretch exercise for me, to be honest with you. I'm a very thoughtful, deliberative person. I overthinking, and that's my unique brain makeup. And this is a stretch exercise for me, which is great. So I'm doing it.
You're modeling.
I'm modeling.
I love that. Let's do it. All right, Zach.
I don't know how well
I'm excited.
Model I'm going to be, but let's go.
Well, let's start because we started there. Let's start around the same place. A piece of paper. I feel like that was in like classroom 2.0 because we're kind of at computers, but let's go with that. A piece of paper 50 years from now.
A reminder to plant a tree.
Oh, I love that. See, we're there already. Okay, let's go to laptop. A laptop.
I think it's going to be a digital archaeology. So a record of our past.
And why will that be important in 50 years?
To think about the decisions that we made and how they impacted the generation that was yet to be born that will be alive in 2071. For me, like intergenerational justice is a big deal, which means what are the rights of the unborn? And I think our laptops will hold a lot of the ways we made decisions, good and bad.
Incredible. One of the objects in a quirky kids classroom at the moment is a wiggle chair because they like to move around.
Ooh.
Let's transform forward into 50 years.
A wiggle chair. I think it'll be a nice wiggly chair to move around in.
That everyone will use.
I think we'll still go to school with people.
Because
and it'll be a norm to move. And I'm a cautious, credible optimist. So I think it'll be a norm to move. And I think that well-being will become a norm because we'll learn that we can't survive without prioritizing it.
I love that. I'm going to throw the last one out for you. Yeah. Oh, look, I think you're realistically optimistic, as you said. I'm going to throw the last one out there, and some of us would argue the most important one: teacher.
A teacher is going to need to be someone who brings out what's best in humanity and in humans, and helps people to learn what it's like to be a human and not just what to do as a human. And so I think a teacher will be a teacher of beingness and not just doing in the future.
A teacher of beingness. Oh, I like that.
I think that our educational system has gone wrong because we've taught people what to do as human beings and we haven't taught people what it's like to be a human being. And I think that's going to be the key role of teachers in the future.
Incredible. Thank you, Zach. I have to applaud
Yeah,
your
that was
ability
fun.
to go big there. Oh,
Yeah,
thank you so much. And for our
of course.
listeners, if anybody wants to take that creative activation strategy or practice into your own learning spaces, you can take our Classroom 5.0 fun sheet available through our link in our show notes. And Zach, it has been an absolute honor. We have gone so many more places than I ever imagined. And at the same time, I am not surprised because your brain has a beautiful way of connecting the dots. And I've loved every single minute. And I know our listeners will have too. Thank you for helping us to imagine the future of learning and work. On that note, where can our listeners best find you to connect?
Yeah, you can go to zachmercurio.com. And I have a newsletter that's on pause right now. I'm about to restart it, where I talk about different research on meaningfulness, purpose, and mattering. But I've become very active on LinkedIn, and I have a really fun community of people that are engaging on LinkedIn, and I'd love to see you there. Zach Mercurio. I post a lot. I don't post anything. I post about me, but I post a lot about mattering and practices to create
Yes.
mattering and meaningfulness. So would love to
And
have you join my community
having
there.
followed both, I am loving your personal approach on LinkedIn. So I would 100% recommend everybody else joins as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, we will leave it
Of course.
there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you have been listening to Classroom 5.0 with Marianne Power. And of course, our beautiful guest, Zach Mercurio. See you later, alligators.